Hi and welcome back to my channel. This is Marla with Mad About Cards and Crafts, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. I had a little session the other day with my Distress Spray stains and my Distress Spray Oxides. I haven't used them in a long while, and I turned on the camera. I thought I would just turn on the camera to just record this play session. I loved my background so much that I thought that I would share this with you. But I'm very sad because part of the footage is pretty blurry. I have just reset up my craft room. I did some moving of furniture, and I just wanted to apologize. This isn't my best footage. Here's a look at the finished cards. I'm not going to be putting the cards together today, but I did want to show you the finished cards for the backgrounds that we are going to be creating. So we are going to just take a look at this play session. I started off with Scorched Timber, Bundled Sage, and Uncharted Mariner. This is B watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton watercolor paper, super thin paper, but because it's 100% cotton, I am going to run this through the wringer, literally. Lots and lots and lots of water on this panel, and this held up beautifully. No tears, no pills. The movement of the inks was beautiful. So I sprayed my panel with a little bit of water. I sprayed those little dots of color from my Distress Spray stains with water, and then I did a little bit of ink smushing. This is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel that we're working on. I'm going to build up my layers, starting with the ink smushing, using different techniques with my Distress Spray stains. So I started strictly with my spray stains, and I'm trying to pick up as much of that color as I can onto this panel. I had just received my Scorched Timber ink packages, and I wanted to play with them. I had created another card a couple years ago when the ink pads for Uncharted Mariner came out, and I mixed it with ground espresso, and I just thought that it was absolutely beautiful. So I wanted to try the Uncharted Mariner with the Scorched Timber, and then I thought I would add in the Bundled Sage. Over the past maybe 4 or 5 months, I have totally been into greens and more of like the sagey kind of olivey tones, and so I wanted to add the Bundled Sage with the Uncharted Mariner and the Scorched Timber. So I added a little bit more of that Scorched Timber. You can see that the Uncharted Mariner in the background does not have that intense deep blue. It actually is taking on a much lighter, softer blue, which is going to add a lot of depth to this panel. So I'm just drawing my panel in between the applications of some of these colors. I've lost quite a bit of that Bundled Sage now, but we're going to get back to that. And here's where I'm coming in, and I'm just spraying it directly onto the panel. So I sprayed it to the areas that I wanted to add that Bundled Sage to. I added a little bit of water, not too much. I'm going to just tilt it to get a little bit of movement. I'll use my heat tool again. This is the Ranger heat tool. I prefer to use this instead of my embossing heat tool because the disbursement of the heat is much better and it doesn't burn the paper. I'm going to add a little bit more of that Uncharted Mariner again, adding some water back on top again, getting it to spread a little bit more, trying to make sure that I have a little bit of each of the colors in kind of a triangular configuration. And I'm using my nozzle to tap some of that on because that is also going to add a little bit of texture to the panel. So we're going to spray a little bit more of that Uncharted Mariner along with some water. You can see I have a big dark splotch, and that again is going to add to the depth. So don't worry about it if you get some of those deeper, darker splotches on there, because it really is going to kind of meld and really add to the charm of the background. All right, now we're coming in with some Oxide sprays. I started with the crushed olive. I added a little bit of antique linen. This is the crushed olive again. I'll do a little bit of spritzing with the water and trying to get a little bit of that movement. Now this is going to tone down some of the areas. It's going to give it more of a milky look. So it's, or creamy. I guess I like that word better, creamy. Don't you think it's a much better description? So it's going to give it a little bit more of a creamy tone. I'm adding a little bit more water, trying to get that antique linen to move just a little bit. And you can see how much that crushed olive, even though it is more of a muted tone, it really did add to that background. It just added a more vibrant green to it. I added some water splatters to get us a little bit more texture. And again, using my heat tool, the heat tool is your friend because it is going to allow you to layer those colors instead of those colors mixing together and creating mud. So I added a little bit more. I had lost some of that Uncharted Mariner. Now you can see that as I'm directly spraying it onto the panel and not adding a whole lot of water to those areas, now I'm getting those deeper blues that are bringing out the lighter blues when we were watering it down. So here's a little bit more of that scorched timber. Again, I wanted to get some of those splatters on there, adding a little bit more texture to the background. And isn't this beautiful? I just thought that the colors really worked well together. That crushed olive added that kind of, you know, brightness to the panel, but yet I still have those deep, dark, intense colors. And I was so pleased with the way that these colors all work together. So I love gold. I love gold a lot. And so I'm going to use a fan brush and my Gansai Tambi Starry watercolors. I do want to apologize. I am a bit off camera because I was playing and I really was not thinking too much about what I was filming. I didn't think this was going to be much of a tutorial, but here we are. So I wanted to add a little bit of texture to this background other than the splatters, and so I'm using this burlap stencil from Tim Holtz, adding a little bit of the scorched timber to different areas. I'm going to try to soften that up a little bit with some water. And then I'll heat it, I'll dry it with my heat tool. And I think this is the Shattered. I think that that's what the name of this stamp is. I'm adding a little bit of my Distress ink in Uncharted Mariner, and we're going to go ahead and add that over the top as well. And again, we're just adding more interest, more depth to the background. So there's going to be a lot. If you saw it in person, you know, pictures are beautiful, but when you see something in person, then you can kind of look at it and you can see all of the different parts of it a little bit more clearly. Now this was a big experiment. This is a Wildflower stamp from Tim Holtz, one of his real early ones. And I thought I would try to add that really yellow gold watercolor to it and do some stamping with it. It ended up getting lost because the background is so intense. The details of this stamp really didn't stand out. Now maybe this might be something that I revisit with this stamp, and I maybe start with like a single layer of color, but because I had such dark colors and so much depth of color, it really didn't translate into the stamped image. So I thought, okay, well, let's try some coffee. This is Archival ink, and see if maybe that brown will show up a little bit better. And no, it really didn't. But I did add it to the top. I did stamp it to the top area, and you were able to kind of see some of the leaves that were going on in that stamp when I move it over to the top section. But I stamped it a couple times and it kind of got lost, but it still added a little bit of interest to the background. I do end up turning the panel around, and that being the upper left hand corner, I think, is of my finished card, so that big gold area is going to be the upper left hand corner of my card. So it ends up working out in the long run, but I don't think that I would try stamping on such a busy background with so much depth of color as this. I'm going to trim this panel down. I end up trimming it down, I believe, to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And so I'm just starting with a 1/4 inch, and then again off camera I'm going to go back and I'll trim it down just a little bit more. And so you can see that finished panel, but I don't think I'm quite finished yet. I think that nope, that is it. That is our finished panel. So there you can see that intense, beautiful color. I loved the colors so much that I thought that I would try it again. So here we are. This is the Canson XL watercolor paper. I am going to spritz the panel with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to lay down the same colors that I started with before. So we're going to start with the Bundled Sage, the Uncharted Mariner, and the Scorched Timber. And I didn't get quite as much water on there, so I'm going to use my finger to try to move that around a little bit. The water splotch kind of went to the side of the ink. And I'm just going to start again with that ink smushing. And you're going to see that this doesn't move quite as nicely as it did on the 100% cotton. It doesn't pick it up quite as well. It's the water. It just looks much more watered down than it did on the other cardstock. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try something a little different. Instead, I'm just going to go direct to paper. I don't want to create a background. I don't want to completely cover the background. I want to create concentrated areas. So I'm going to work at this a little bit differently, take a little bit of a different approach to this panel. I'm trying to get that to move, and you can see that it just does not move quite as well as it did on that 100% cotton cardstock. So I think I may use up this Canson XL, and I think I'm going to buy another pack, maybe some Strathmore. I have some Fabriano Artistico that I might be able to try this with, and I do have a few panels of the Distress watercolor paper, so maybe I'll try those ones. But I really wasn't thrilled with the movement that I was getting on this Canson XL with the Distress spray stains. Now, if I just wanted to spray concentrates of color, it's fine, but here I'm trying to do a little bit more layering, and I'm going to have to work just a little bit harder with this watercolor paper. So you can see that it just isn't moving. I'm going to have to force it with my fingers and with brushes a little bit more. So I sprayed some water down. I'm adding a little bit more of that Bundled Sage. It wasn't moving, so I added a little bit more water to the panel, trying to get it to move. I really am going to have to soak this a little bit more. Again, I came back in with the paintbrush, trying to get that movement, and then I'll dry the panel. So you have to play with different watercolor papers so that you know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I know that a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to buy, 3 or 4 different watercolor papers. But if you find that something isn't working and you're really not happy with it, you might try picking up maybe a little bit better quality watercolor paper when you're working with spray stains or when you're working with watercolors in general. And that might be what you're missing in your projects, because paper really does make a difference. So you can see I'm adding that Uncharted Mariner. It mixes beautifully with that Scorched Timber, and then I'm just drying it. Now with this paper, because it's a little bit thicker, I can just, instead of moving my heat tool around, I end up just focusing the heat tool on the area that I spritzed. So I'm adding a little bit more of the Uncharted Mariner. I wanted a little bit more of that blue. And look at how well that Scorched Timber is playing right there with the bundled sage. It really does transition nicely, that green and the Scorched Timber. Now here I'm getting a little bit more movement, which was nice. And again, I'm going to dry this panel in between. And you might think, okay, I see what you're doing. I'm going to stop here, but I want you to hang on for just a minute, because I am going to do a little bit of stenciling with some grit paste on this panel. And it just totally elevates it. It changes it from a meh panel to a wow panel. And that's what I really like about working with mixed media projects. You just try different things, especially when you're in play mode and you just want to not stress about what you're. I mean, I could easily throw this away. If I hated it, I could have easily thrown it away. It's just the whole process of, playing and seeing what your products do, learning how they work, as I mentioned, with different mediums, with different papers. Now, I had sprayed too much water in that center area, so I did need to add a little bit more of the bundled sage. And here I'm just using my finger, trying to help move things along. If you don't want to get your finger inky, you certainly can use gloves for this, but your finger really is your friend when you're working with watercolors and spray stains and things like that. Now I'm almost done here, and again, I apologize for being off camera. I'm going to start adding my texture with water. So you saw that I did that clapping motion. Here we're going to add a little bit, not a whole lot. I'm going to do more of a splattering, and I'm going to dry the splatters instead of using the water with this, but that is the crushed olive. I did not use the antique linen on this panel. I don't believe so. I don't think that I did. So this is the nope, I went with the Scorched Timber Distress Oxide. So this is the Distressed Oxide in the Scorched Timber, and I'm adding those splatters. And I'm going to come back in with my Gansai Tambi. Of course, I need those gold splatters on this panel, so I'm just going to add some light splatters with that medium gold. And I stuck with more of the yellow golds for this. I didn't think that those lighter golds over on the other end of the pans would really stand out on this background. Here's what I love. Wait till you see. I'm going to show you the finished card again. This is the translucent grit paste. So I'm just using this Bouquet stencil. Again, this is from Tim Holtz, and this is going to dry translucent. Now, I forgot to turn the camera back on when these paste had dried so that you could really see what it looked like without me building a card around it. But the panel was just beautiful. I wanted to use my bundled sage embossing glaze. Now the embossing glaze is translucent, so the colors underneath are going to show, but because the green and the blues and the browns play nicely together, when I add that bundled sage over the top of it, some of those areas are really going to get intense with color. So here we're adding that bundled sage. And then I'm going to put it back in my jar as best I can. And look at that. Isn't that pretty? I think it would be really pretty if I would have done it with the opaque grit paste as well, but the translucent, it's just going to have that tiny bit of texture in the background. So this was another panel that I played with. This is Antique Linen Ground Espresso and Scorched Timber. There's a look at the finished card with panel number 1, and then here is panel number 2, and look at that background. I will link all the supplies that I used in the description box below. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was an informational video that would be helpful to you. Until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.